funny how a whole crowd can become obsessed with someone they claim doesn't matter. They watch you, criticize you, question you, talk about you, and somehow still find enough time to keep checking what you're doing next. If you were truly irrelevant, they wouldn't need a committee meeting every time you made a move. But the moment you stop reacting, stop explaining, and start walking your own path, suddenly everybody wants to know what's different, maybe. That's the part they can't understand. They remember the version of you that was easier to provoke, the version that needed approval, the version that would hear 10 voices against you and immediately start questioning yourself. They thought pressure would make you smaller, but instead it forced you to become sharper. Every attack became a lesson. Every rejection became distance. Every attempt to discourage you became another reason to examine who you were becoming, and now they're uncomfortable. Not because you're claiming to be better than them, but because you're no longer behaving the way they expected. They keep coming for you because your transformation challenges the story they created about you. They want the old version back because the old version was predictable. The old version could be distracted. The old version could be embarrassed into silence. The old version could be pushed into explaining itself for hours. But that version isn't running the show anymore. You've learned to pause. You've learned to observe. You've learned that not every accusation deserves a response, and not every crowd deserves access to your mind. Call it being chosen. Call it being tested. Call it discovering your purpose. Whatever language you use, the important part is what you're actually doing with the pressure. You're becoming more disciplined instead of more bitter, more focused instead of more distracted, more grounded instead of desperate to prove yourself. Because the real victory isn't watching people panic about your growth. The real victory is realizing their reaction doesn't control your direction. Let them talk. Let them speculate, let them create their theories about why you've changed them of anything, convince them of anything, convince them of ending your jobs to deepen the character. Discipline, wisdom, and courage that made the old version of you impossible to recognize, while the people who keep trying to pull you backward slowly discover that the person they thought they could intimidate has become far more interested in purpose than approval, far more interested in growth than arguments, and far more interested in becoming who they were meant to become than proving anything to a crowd that already decided what they wanted to believe about them. They thought the attacks were supposed to break you, but they didn't understand what pressure does to someone who refuses to stay down. Every criticism, every insult, every attempt to make you question yourself became another lesson you didn't ask for, but eventually learned to use. They wanted you distracted, emotional, desperate to defend yourself, because that's what happens when people believe they can control your attention. But somewhere along the way, you stopped fighting every battle they threw at you and started studying what those battles were teaching you. Funny thing about pressure. It doesn't always destroy people. Sometimes it reveals them. You discovered how much patience you actually had. You discovered that you could hear disrespect without immediately losing control. You discovered that rejection wasn't a death sentence. You discovered that being misunderstood didn't mean you had to spend your entire life explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Every attack showed you another weakness you needed to strengthen, another boundary you needed to build, another habit you needed to leave behind. And the people watching probably thought they were winning. That's the beautiful part. They were giving you material. Every time they underestimated you, you had another reason to become more disciplined. Every time they tried to embarrass you, you learned not to build your identity around applause. Every time they pushed you away, you learned how to stand without needing someone beside you. Every time they questioned your ability, you were forced to stop talking about potential and start producing evidence. That's how pressure becomes training, not because suffering is magical And not because every attack is secretly good for you, but because you decided that their behavior wasn't going to determine what you became. That's the part they couldn't control. They could create noise. They could create doubt. They could create uncomfortable moments, but they couldn't choose your response. You did, and once you understood that, their power started shrinking. You stopped asking, "Why are they doing this to me?" and started asking, "What can I learn from what this situation is showing me?" You stopped measuring your worth by how fairly people treated you and started measuring yourself by how consistently you kept your standards when things became difficult. You stopped expecting everyone to recognize your value and started building a life that didn't require constant recognition. That's when the whole game changed, because someone who learns from every setback becomes difficult to defeat in the same way twice. You can criticize them, and they adapt. You can reject them, and they learn. You can disappoint them, and they recover. You can underestimate them, and they use the doubt as information instead of a verdict. They aren't becoming invincible. They're becoming experienced, and experience has a strange way of making old tactics useless. The same words that once destroyed your confidence don't hit the same anymore. The same people who once knew exactly how to trigger, you suddenly find themselves talking to someone who has learned to pause. The same situations that once felt impossible now look like problems you've already survived in another form. That's growth, not becoming someone who never gets hurt. Becoming someone who knows what to do after getting hurt. So let them keep thinking the pressure is breaking you. Let them keep measuring your reaction. Let them keep waiting for you to become the person they remember, while you quietly turn every difficult experience into discipline, every disappointment into wisdom, every boundary into self-respect, and every attempt to pull you backward into another reason to keep moving forward without giving them the satisfaction of deciding who you become next. They thought they were fighting you, but they were actually revealing you. Every attack, every insult, every attempt to make you feel small was exposing something you didn't even know was becoming stronger inside you. Funny, isn't it? They thought they were putting pressure on your weaknesses, but pressure has a nasty little habit of revealing strengths nobody noticed before. They wanted you emotional. They wanted you distracted. They wanted you constantly defending yourself, explaining yourself, proving that you deserve to be taken seriously. Instead, you started learning. You started watching. You started understanding that not every attack deserves your attention, and not every person deserves access to your emotions. That's when their whole strategy started looking ridiculous, because they were still fighting the person they remembered, while you were becoming someone they hadn't prepared for. They remember the version of you who reacted quickly, who took criticism personally, who needed people to understand your intentions, who thought every misunderstanding had to be corrected immediately. They don't understand that version isn't driving anymore. You learned what their pressure was teaching you. You learned patience from the moments that forced you to wait. You learned discipline from the days when motivation disappeared. You learned self-respect from the people who treated your kindness like weakness. You learned boundaries from the people who kept crossing them. You learned silence from arguments that were never about truth in the first place. And every lesson became another layer of strength. That's why the same criticism doesn't hit the same anymore. The same rejection doesn't destroy your confidence anymore. The same manipulation doesn't automatically pull you into an argument anymore. You can see the pattern now. You can recognize when someone is trying to provoke you just to watch you lose control. You can recognize when criticism is useful and when it's simply designed to make you doubt yourself. You can recognize when someone is giving advice and when they're trying to make your choices for you. That's growth. Not becoming untouchable. Becoming harder to control. And here's the beautiful part: you don't have to prove that their attacks made you stronger. You don't have to stand in front of them and announce everything you've learned. Let your behavior tell the story. Let your discipline speak. Let your consistency speak. Let your calmness speak. Let the fact that you're still moving forward speak. Because the person who spends all their energy trying to convince the crowd that they're strong usually hasn't realized where real strength comes from. Real strength doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need revenge. It doesn't need applause. It simply keeps moving. So if they keep coming for you, don't waste your life asking why they're obsessed with pulling you backward. Ask yourself what their pressure has taught you about moving forward. Maybe it taught you to trust yourself. Maybe it taught you to choose your circle carefully. Maybe it taught you to stop explaining your worth to people committed to misunderstanding it. Maybe it taught you that your future cannot be built around the opinions of people who only remember your past. And maybe the greatest lesson was realizing that they can challenge you, criticize you, misunderstand you, and underestimate you. But they cannot decide what those experiences turn you into unless you hand them that power. Because every time you choose growth instead of bitterness, discipline instead of reaction, and purpose instead of proving yourself, you're taking everything they tried to use against you and turning it into another reason they can no longer recognize the person standing in front of them. They keep shouting from the crowd as if volume gives them authority, as if 10 opinions suddenly become one truth, as if everybody else's expectations are supposed to become your instructions. Funny little trick, isn't it? A group can make enough noise that you start believing you have to answer every voice, defend every decision, explain every move, justify every boundary. And for a while, maybe you did. Maybe you allowed their reactions to determine your mood. Maybe one criticism could ruin your entire day. Maybe one person's doubt could make you question a decision you had already made. But eventually you discover something almost insulting in its simplicity. The crowd doesn't have to live your life. They don't carry your consequences. They don't wake up inside your mind. They don't have to deal with the opportunities you missed because you were too busy trying to make everyone comfortable. So why should their opinions control your direction? You can listen without obeying. You can consider advice without surrendering your judgment. You can respect someone and still disagree with them. You can hear criticism without automatically accepting the identity someone is trying to place on you. That's the difference between awareness and approval addiction. You stop asking, will they like this? And start asking, is this right for me? You stop asking, what will they say? And start asking, what happens if I don't do this? You stop building your decisions around avoiding criticism and start building them around your values, your responsibilities, and the future you're trying to create. Suddenly the crowd gets smaller. Not because they disappeared, but because their voices stopped occupying every corner of your mind. That's freedom. And don't misunderstand it. This isn't about becoming arrogant and pretending you know everything. That's just another form of insecurity wearing expensive clothing. You should still listen. You should still learn. You should still admit when you're wrong. You should still value people who genuinely care about you. But there is a difference between receiving wisdom and surrendering control. Someone can offer you a map, but you still have to decide whether the destination belongs to you. Someone can warn you about a road, but you still have to understand the terrain. Someone can criticize your choices, but they don't automatically become the owner of your future. That's why you need to become comfortable disappointing people sometimes. You won't always make choices that everyone understands. You won't always follow the path your family, friends, community, or critics expect. Some people will call it selfish when you finally establish boundaries. Some will call it arrogance when you stop asking permission. Some will say you've changed when you've simply stopped allowing them to define you. Let them talk. Their interpretation doesn't become your reality just because they repeat it loudly. Your job is not to manage every person's opinion. Your job is to manage your direction. Keep your eyes on what you're building. Keep your standards clear. Keep your conscience clean. And when the noise gets loud, remember that a crowd can point in 100 directions while your life can only move in one. So choose that direction carefully and keep walking without turning every few steps to check whether everyone behind you approves of where you're going. Because the moment you stop letting the crowd steer your decisions, their opinions become what they always should have been. Information you can consider, not commands you have to obey, leaving you free to move with intention instead of spending your life performing for people who will never be satisfied with every choice you make. They call it pressure like it's supposed to destroy you. But sometimes pressure is the thing that finally forces you to discover what you've been carrying all along. You can spend years moving through life without realizing how much strength is buried underneath comfort, routine, and other people's expectations. Then something happens. The people around you start doubting you, doors close, plans fall apart. The criticism gets louder. Suddenly you're standing in the middle of a situation you never asked for, looking around and wondering why everything feels like a test. Maybe it is a test, but not the kind you think. The real question isn't whether you can make everyone stop attacking you. The real question is whether you can keep becoming yourself while the noise is happening. Because pressure has a way of stripping away the fake parts. It shows you who you are when nobody is applauding. It shows you whether your confidence depends on attention or whether it comes from something deeper. It shows you whether your purpose is real or whether it disappears the moment things become uncomfortable. And maybe that's why this season feels so strange. You're discovering that you don't need perfect circumstances to move forward. You don't need everyone supporting you. You don't need every person to understand your decisions. You need enough discipline to keep taking the next step, even when the room is full of opinions telling you to turn around. That's where purpose starts becoming visible. Not in the easy moments when everything agrees with you, but in the moments when you have every excuse to quit and still decide to continue. You begin noticing things about yourself that were hidden before. You become more patient, more selective, more focused. You stop chasing every opportunity and start asking whether it actually belongs to the life you're building. You stop trying to impress people who only notice you when you're winning. You start protecting your time because you finally understand that attention is a resource. You start choosing your circle more carefully because you realize that constant negativity can make even a strong person question their direction. And slowly, the pressure that once felt like punishment begins functioning like a filter. It removes distractions. It exposes weak foundations. It forces you to decide what actually matters. Maybe that's what people misunderstand about being chosen or anointed. It isn't a magical excuse to avoid struggle. If anything, the deeper your purpose becomes, the more seriously you have to take your character. You can't build something meaningful while allowing every critic to become your compass. You can't discover your direction while constantly checking whether everyone else approves. You can't become disciplined if every uncomfortable moment makes you retreat. So let the pressure reveal what needs to be strengthened. Let difficult seasons teach you patience. Let rejection teach you discernment. Let criticism teach you where improvement is needed and where unnecessary noise should be ignored. Let isolation teach you how to stand without an audience. Let responsibility teach you that purpose isn't just a feeling you get when you're inspired. It's something you demonstrate through repeated choices, through the days when nobody sees the work, through the moments when you could easily return to old habits, but choose differently, and through the quiet realization that maybe the thing you've been calling an attack is also exposing the exact qualities you needed to develop in order to handle the next level of your life without becoming controlled by the same fears. Distractions and opinions that once kept you from moving forward. They can keep talking, keep questioning, keep watching. Keep trying to figure out why you haven't fallen apart yet. But you don't have to give them a performance. That's the mistake people make when they feel misunderstood. They start explaining everything. They want everyone to know what happened, why they changed, why they walked away, why they're building differently now. They think if they can just tell the story perfectly, the crowd will finally understand. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Some people aren't confused about your transformation. They simply don't like what it means for them. They were comfortable with the version of you they could predict, influence, criticize, or underestimate. When you start changing your standards, your habits, your circle, and your direction, suddenly their old picture of you becomes useless. And instead of updating the picture, they sometimes attack the person holding it. That's why you don't need to convince everybody. Let your life answer. If they think you're undisciplined, let consistency answer. If they think you can't grow, let progress answer. If they think you're all talk, let your actions answer. If they think you're weak, let your ability to keep moving answer. Not with revenge, not with insults, not with some dramatic speech designed to make them regret doubting you. Just results. Because results have a strange way of ending arguments without saying a word. You don't have to announce every victory. You don't have to post every struggle. You don't have to tell everyone what you're planning before you've built it. Sometimes protecting your progress means keeping certain things private. Let people wonder. Let them speculate. Let them create whatever story makes sense to them while you focus on the work. Nobody sees that's where real transition happens, in the boring mornings, in the moments when you choose discipline over comfort, when you refuse to return to habits that once controlled you, in the moments nobody is speech, not them double the naples. The evidence is who you become when nobody is watching and your storm is watching. If your transformation, your moment then is watching. When no one is watching. You won't need to spend your life defending it. Your character will become the explanation. Your boundaries will become the explanation. Your consistency will become the explanation. The way you handle pressure will become the explanation. The way you treat people, when you finally have power, will become the explanation. That's the part that matters. Because becoming stronger isn't about becoming cruel to everyone who doubted you. It's about refusing to let their doubt turn you into someone you don't respect. You don't need to become bitter because they were unfair. You don't need to become arrogant because they underestimated you. You don't need to become obsessed with proving them wrong. That's still letting them control you. The real victory is becoming so focused on your purpose that their opinions lose their ability to redirect you. They can misunderstand, you keep building. They can criticize, you keep learning. They can question, you keep improving. They can walk away, you keep moving. But eventually, the story becomes impossible to argue with because it isn't being written through explanations anymore. It's being written through choices, habits, discipline, patience, character, and the quiet accumulation of progress that nobody can manufacture overnight. So don't spend your life trying to convince a crowd that you're becoming something different. Become it. Don't waste your energy demanding recognition from people who were committed to overlooking you. Build anyway. Don't chase validation from people who only notice you when you're useful to their story. Keep your standards anyway, and don't confuse being anointed with being entitled to an easy road, because whatever you believe about your purpose, the responsibility is still yours to develop the character required to carry it, to stay grounded when people praise you, to stay disciplined when they criticize you, and to keep walking when the crowd finally realizes that the person they spent so much time trying to define decided to define their own future through action rather than explanation, through purpose rather than approval, and through consistent growth rather than the temporary opinions of people who were never meant to hold the steering wheel of your life.